Hey everyone, this is Nick and welcome to the last Linux and open source news video in this particular studio. I'm moving to a new flat next week and so the decor will look different in the next one, but don't worry, this series is obviously continuing. So this week we've got the US potentially looking at breaking up Google into multiple companies after Google search was ruled a monopoly. We also have the release of Deepin 23, potentially the first Linux distro with consumer-facing AI features, and we also have Valve confirming that yes, SteamOS is going to come to other devices than just the Steam Deck. And we also have this message from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by TuxCare, your provider of solutions to ensure your workstation and server fleets stay up to date and secure. They offer zero reboot live patching solutions for your Linux kernel, they have enterprise support for Alma Linux, and extended lifecycle support for end-of-life distros like CentOS, Ubuntu, Oracle Linux, and more. And speaking of extended lifecycle support, they now also offer their post-end-of-life security support for your Java applications that rely on Spring projects, like Spring Framework. This framework, or at least its version 5.3, will reach end-of-life at the end of August this year, just like the Spring Boot framework already did, meaning that unless you have already transitioned to a newer version, you don't have much time to secure your enterprise applications. Since upgrading to the latest release introduces breaking changes, you might want a bit more time to plan this migration, and that's what TuxCare gives you with 3 years of security patches for Spring vulnerabilities and 14-day SLAs for these fixes, so you can stay compliant and take the time to prepare your migration on your own schedule. So, as always, click the link in the description to know more about TuxCare's extended lifecycle services. So, following the recent ruling on Google search classifying it as a monopoly, it looks like the US Justice Department is considering breaking up Alphabet, Google's parent company. That's not the only solution they're looking at though, there's also the possibility they might simply force Google to share more data with competitors so they don't retain unfair advantages, or they could just have to sell one single small part of Alphabet. It does look like the various exclusivity deals Google has in place with browser developers won't be allowed anymore, meaning while Google will still be able to pay to be the default in a browser, they won't be able to force web browser developers to only provide Google as the default, so browsers could potentially offer multiple choices to their users and potentially sign more contracts with more search engines and make more money. If a breakup was in order though, it is likely that Android would be spun off Alphabet and they wouldn't be part of the same company anymore. AdWords would also potentially have to be sold. There's still a chance none of these options will come to bear, as Google is of course appealing that monopoly ruling. They're not going to let themselves be broken up without a fight. And if you think breaking up Google might be too harsh, just remember that they do abuse their dominant position a lot. For example, if you try to block Google's AI search crawler that generates AI summaries of your web pages before showing any user any result, well, then you're also blocking Googlebot, meaning you don't appear in Google searches at all. So Google only gives you the choice to let them scrape your content, and thus you lose visitors when Google gives people a summary of your work on its search engine, so they don't click on your website. Or you can be invisible on the biggest search engine in the world if you don't want to be crawled by an AI bot. And if that's not enough monopoly or dominant position abuse for you, there's also the fact that for Android, for example, Google forces any device manufacturer that wants to ship complete Android with Google services to also ship Google Chrome and a Google search widget by default, those being unremovable at all by the user. Google also gives themselves 16 times more data than what they give to their competitors when it comes to targeting users with advertisements, meaning that Google products are always better targeted for consumers and they're always placed first compared to alternative competing products, which is also very clearly abusing their dominant position. Now, Google has the most used browser and browser engine in the world, the most prevalent ad network in the entire world, the most prevalent search engine in the entire world, and the most used operating system for smartphones in the entire world. If all of that colluded doesn't scream monopoly and dominant position to you, and if everything that I listed doesn't scream abuse to you, then I don't know what will convince you. But yeah, break up Google please and let's see the results. Now, this week, Deepin 23 was released as well, a major update to the distro who makes the pretty nice looking Deepin desktop environment. Deepin 23 now supports ARM64 and RISC-V architectures through their repos, and more than 8,000 packages were updated. They also introduced atomic updates, a system taken from immutable distros to make sure you can roll back easily to an earlier, working version in case an update breaks something. They also finally brought their new packaging format that they announced a long while back called Lineapps. It's an alternative to Flatpaks and Snaps, as in it's a package once, ship everywhere packaging format. Not sure we needed yet another one of these, or even wanted yet another one of these, but there you go, it exists now. The Deepin desktop also saw a bunch of changes with a new taskbar, a new launcher, a few other personalization options, and they also have a new control center app that departs from the usual sidebar settings that Deepin used to have a while back. They also added the ability to share files, to share your clipboard and the mouse cursor between operating systems, notably with Windows computers, and they now let you sync your calendar and browser data across devices as well. Finally, they added AI capabilities to their launcher and a few other places in the system. Some of these are local tools, some call to other online AI models. So Deepin users will have access to a new personal knowledge assistant to which you can feed your own documents, and the AI will arrange these into a knowledge base that you can use in the future. It's not a general purpose AI chatbot, it's only going to know what you gave it locally. Deepin users will also get the Deepin System Assistant, which is basically just an AI database based on the manual for Deepin, so you can query anything you want without having to use the manual application. And they also added AI to the system-wide search feature called Ground Search. So for example, you could ask the launcher to change your wallpaper for this file, or to change the audio volume to 25% if you wanted, or to modify the display brightness. And this will apparently just do it for you thanks to AI. The model this uses apparently also accepts various other large language models in the OpenAI format, so you could possibly extend these capabilities. All of these changes combined mean that Deepin 23 should be a big enough update so that I should take a look at it. So you can expect a video about this, not next week, but probably the week after that, because next week I'll be moving, I won't have time to make a video. Now, Mozilla seems to have heard people's complaints about Firefox and the lack of attention it seems to have received for the few past years. In an interview with Fast Company, Laura Chambers, the current Mozilla CEO, said that they are reinvesting in Firefox. We've seen parts of this focus with vertical tabs being added in the experimental branch, tab hover previews being deployed to all Firefox users, they have stuff planned for tab grouping and user profile switching, and there's also the already available improvements to the reader mode. Chambers also said that Mozilla is talking to the community about supporting PWAs again, to try and bring back web app support in a competent way. In the end, since February, Mozilla scaled back their efforts on everything else than Firefox and started focusing all these efforts back on the browser, which I can only applaud. Of course, they also made a bunch of mistakes, notably by dallying in the ad business and really communicating extremely badly about everything they did in that space. Now, the main issue that Fast Company discusses is, what is the role of Firefox right now? By default, it's not necessarily the best browser for privacy, it doesn't come with a complete tracker or ad blocker by default, it does ship with telemetry baked in as an opt-out feature, and a few ad-related opt-out features as well. It is not necessarily the most focused on productivity compared to other browsers, which are basically operating systems like Vivaldi. It's also not necessarily the easiest option on mobile devices. So really, what's the role of Firefox right now? And full disclaimer, it's still the browser that I'm using right now and I'm trying to stick to it as much as I can. But Chambers says that the reason people would want to start using Firefox or move back to it is because of Mozilla's values, like they're not beholden to a specific company and they just have these privacy-respecting values. The problem is their actions don't really match with that, because Firefox and Mozilla in general are completely dependent on Google, so one could say they are totally beholden to a company, and their values in terms of privacy and respecting user choice are completely contradicted by their recent moves with opt-out features without any communication. So I understand where Mozilla is trying to head, but they really need to try and understand who their core user base is, because they're alienating that right now. Wayland just gained another protocol, this time the Screen Capture Protocol. Specifically, these extensions are named Image Capture Source v1 and Image Copy Capture v1, and they've both been merged into the Wayland protocol's repo. These are based upon the work done by WL Roots and improve upon it to build solid screen capture under Wayland with better performance and specific window capture as well, including any use case involving remote desktop with RDP or VNC, or screen sharing in various applications. Now obviously, to provide actually useful implementations of this protocol, they added that to the WL Roots library, to the WayVNC viewer, and to the Grim Wayland image capturing software. Chances are other apps providing screen sharing or screen capture features will rely on these protocols in the future as well, like OBS or the built-in screen recording tools of various desktop environments. And that's one less problematic area for Wayland. Now, with all these protocols in place, if an application doesn't support screen sharing or screen recording under Wayland, it is entirely their fault and not Wayland. So yeah, Discord, update your app please. Now, as the EU is set to enforce the Cyber Resiliency Act soon, the Ubuntu blog, of all things, has a nice write-up of what it means for software, notably for open source software. The takeaways are that this is an important piece of legislation, as it aims to make sure consumers buy devices and software solutions that are safer by making companies comply with a few more practices and certifications when it comes to developing and securing their software. The EU also added some exceptions for open source software to ensure that non-commercial, fast projects aren't held to the same standards as commercial, proprietary software, and they also won't have to comply with as many onerous checks and practices. That's for the good stuff, but there's also some bad stuff. The main issue is that the commercial projects isn't really very well defined, and it covers way too many things. For example, a developer who makes money through donations and doesn't reinvest these in their project but uses this money for their own needs will be considered a commercial project and will be subject to the CRA, which feels very strange. It also means that someone needs to take accountability for the open source software that they ship to users. If it's not the original developers, because they're not a commercial project, for example, it can be the company that sells services around that software, or who provides access to that software in a product, for example, a cloud provider. If no one takes accountability for the software though, then chances are you won't be using it at all and it won't be distributed to anyone because it won't be certified and it won't comply with the CRA. It also means companies will need to provide a lot of documentation to communicate their entire software supply chain, from the code they develop themselves to what they grabbed from NPM or whatever else. They need to know where that software comes from and how up to date they are on patching every single vulnerability. In the end, all this means is a lot more paperwork, a lot more administrative work, and probably a lot less free and open source software adoption, because you're always going to favor, as a company, a proprietary commercial solution whose developers is certified, instead of having to take ownership of an open source project whose developers have not taken ownership and responsibility for the code. And let's finish this with the gaming news. And it's finally happening! Valve has confirmed that they do want to have SteamOS on other devices. And the first of these is the ROG Ally, as the latest release notes for SteamOS indicated some changes to the system to better support this specific handheld. This doesn't mean that the ROG Ally will be sold with SteamOS pre-installed, just that you will be, in the future, able to install SteamOS on that device. The Verge reached out to Valve to confirm that this is what they had in mind, and they did confirm it. They said that the notes about the ROG Ally keys support is related to third-party device support for SteamOS. They also said that the team is continuing to add support for more handhelds on SteamOS. They also said that they're not ready yet, even though they're making good progress. They're also working on improving drivers for Windows, even though it's still not officially supported, even with the new drivers for the Steam Deck OLED model. And they also want to offer a dual boot option for the Steam Deck, so you'll have two options. On the one hand, a very good gaming OS with performance, good game compatibility, and perfect optimization for handhelds, and on the other hand, Windows. Of course, you already had plenty of options to run a Linux-based OS on various handhelds, like for example Bazzite, Nobara, Chimera OS, and others. But if you wanted the official SteamOS experience, then just know it is coming. And what's more important, it means that yes, Valve does want to promote more devices with SteamOS, not just the Steam Deck, meaning that potential consumers will have more options in the future, which is always good for Linux's gaming potential and Linux's growth in the gaming market. And speaking of device choice, let's hear about our sponsor. It's Tuxedo computers. They make laptops, desktops, and small form factor computers that run Linux out of the box. They have a big range of devices that should cover every need and every price point. Everything is super configurable with a bunch of components that you can pick from, your own logo engraved on your device, your own keyboard layout on various laptops, you decide. I only use Tuxedo devices these days. My entire channel is run from one of their laptops, from script writing to editing, everything is done on a Tuxedo laptop, and all my gaming is done on one of their Tuxedo cubes, which I'm running Nobara on. So if you need a new computer, you want to make sure that it supports Linux well, and you want to support a company that actually contributes to Linux's development, then click the link in the description below and get a Tuxedo PC. They're really, really good. Okay, so this will conclude this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, to write a comment. And if you really like the channel, there are also plenty of links in the description to support it. Click that to know more. You'll get some cool perks in the process. So, thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!